What I hope to do today is give a little bit of information about the World Cup and what it is in 2026. Then spend a little bit of time on how we are approaching it as the local organizing committee. And as Ann said, my name is Leo Floor, and I'm the Chief Legacy Officer at the local organizing committee. And then really want to start getting into asking a couple of questions that hopefully set us up for ongoing conversations around how we can use the World Cup to impact the community in a positive way. And part of that is businesses within the community in a positive way. And we know that we've got a history of some other events that haven't necessarily met that moment, and we're trying to learn from those, and part of that is talking to people. The World Cup is a big event. It's the biggest sporting event in the world, and this is the biggest version of the World Cup that we've ever had. And Seattle is one of 16 host cities, one of 11 in the US. The tournament is going to happen across 3 nations for the first time. And if you do all the math in terms of 48 nations playing instead of the original 32, we end up with 104 matches, and 6 of those are going to happen inside of Seattle, over at Lumen Field. We are close to Vancouver, BC, which is another of the 16 host cities, and we're 2 of the closest. And so another thing that's really interesting is the way that Vancouver and Seattle will interact, and we think we'll get a lot of crowd movement between the 2 cities. And when I show you the schedule here in a moment, you can see how the matches lay out in a way that probably will promote that kind of movement between the 2 cities. We expect about 750,000 people will come to Seattle for the World Cup. That's an estimate. We don't have a sort of refined way of knowing that, but it's based on previous World Cups. When we talk about the number of people who will have their eyes on the community, the least watched World Cup match in Qatar in 2022 had 200 million people watch it. That's the most boring, most poorly timed match. That's the number of people who watched it across the world. Who knows what the most watched thing in the US is on any given year?
Super Bowl.
Super Bowl. How many people watch a Super Bowl? 185 million people across the world will watch the Super Bowl. So the least watched World Cup game gets more people watching it than the most watched TV event in the United States on any given year. And that's just the least watched one. So the final for the World Cup in 2022 had 1.5 billion people watch it. And then the total number of unique viewers of any of the World Cup games in 2022 is over 5 billion people. So more than half the human beings on Earth tuned into some part of the World Cup. Now, we're not going to get 5 billion people watching the matches here in Seattle. Again, Seattle is one of 16 host nations, but we do expect that we will have hundreds of millions of people watching and hundreds of thousands of people visiting while we've got the World Cup here in Seattle. And it's just 568 days away. So match schedule-wise, this is a little bit of an eye chart, but the yellow highlighted dates, those are the dates that Seattle has matches. There are 6 of them again. 4 of them are going to be in the group stages. The first of those will be June 15th, and then June 19th, which is Juneteenth. Folks who are interested in following the US team, the only teams where we already know when they're going to play and where they're going to play are the 3 host nations. So Canada, Mexico, and the United States, we know where their group stages will be. And the US's second group stage match is going to happen here in Seattle on Juneteenth. So that's a profound responsibility if you have hundreds of millions of people watching, hundreds of thousand people visiting, while the US team is here in Seattle on a uniquely American holiday. That's something that is both, we're really excited about, and it's a real responsibility that we have to meet in order to communicate, educate to the world what Juneteenth is about, and then do right by the local community, and the Black community in this case in particular, to make sure that we're spreading the benefit while we're talking about that holiday to their communities. Same thing with Pride. So on June 26th, we have a match that will happen on the Friday night before Pride weekend here. And it's a sort of similar level of responsibility that we really feel with the way that we're going to show the world how to celebrate our entire community. Again, if you watched the World Cup in 2022, You may have been following it. Whether a person was allowed to wear a rainbow armband in a stadium was a controversy at the time. We do not intend to have that same kind of controversy here. We're going to celebrate the whole community, and in this case, our LGBTQ plus community. And again, it's a real responsibility for both the visitors here and the folks who will be tuning in across the world. Vancouver, you can see that almost all the games are offset by a day or two. So that's what I mean by the opportunity for folks to perhaps fly into Vancouver, watch a match, drive down to Seattle, ride the train down Seattle, take a bus down to Seattle, watch a match, maybe go back up, stay here. The other thing to get out of this is, again, we are aware and have heard quite a bit already about the history of recent sporting events, and the Major League Baseball All-Star Game is the most recent of those, but it's not the only one, where the issue is that folks sort of come in, say, hey, everybody get ready, but then the nature of the event itself sort of concentrates the benefit within the stadium area. And there might be some transitional benefit, but not to the level that people hope for in the rest of the community. One of the things that we do think is going to make the World Cup different is the length of the event in addition to the volume of folks. So unlike a concert or unlike even the Major League Baseball All-Star Game, there's not just sort of a single event that everything is going to spin around. You have these 6 games spread out over what we think is about 3.5 weeks. We expect that number of visitors, again, 750,000 people coming from Vancouver to Seattle. And so what we think is that the profile of a person who's coming to the US to watch the games and then coming to Seattle specifically is that they're going to stay here a little bit longer. That means they're going to have time. And one of the things that we are taking as our responsibility is how do we help people understand what they can do with their time in a way that broadens the benefit instead of concentrating it. Get people out into the CID, out into Pioneer Square, out into SoDo, and then because of the Juneteenth matches and the Pride matches, up into Capitol Hill and up into the Central District. So that's really the zone that we're taking a look at in terms of trying to broaden the benefit of the World Cup. And you can see how the calendar supports that. I've told you a bunch of things that we know, but there's still a lot that we don't know, and one key piece of information in particular. But we are going to have what we call a big fan celebration or fan fest. If you've watched soccer games in the past for previous World Cups, there's usually some like outdoor party with 30,000 people sitting around a fountain, and then it shows a picture of them jumping up and screaming or crying dejectedly when they've lost a game or scored a goal. That party for us is going to be up at Seattle Center. So one of the additional ways that we're really broadening the benefit of the event is by keeping Seattle Center as the fan fest, and we expect about 30,000 people a day will visit there. And then the stadium itself, which we expect every match will be sold out, and you'd get about 63,000 people there. And then other folks who might just sort of be in the area wanting to be close to the World Cup. You can see how that's a lot of people over most of downtown. And again, that's a lot of potential benefit that we can help broaden across the community. One thing that I'll highlight here is which nations get assigned to play in Seattle besides the United States is a big question for us. So if Brazil or Japan or South Korea or Uruguay get assigned to play their group stage matches or their knockout round matches in Seattle, we would expect them to come with big groups of fans, especially Pacific Rim countries, whether in South America or Asia. The sort of directness or the proximity to our state and our part of the state really makes it so that we would expect large contingents of folks to come and watch the matches and be around the matches. One of the things that's interesting about World Cups like this, we even saw it in another soccer tournament called Copa America in 2024. Tens of thousands of people come just to be close to the team. They don't have tickets. There was something like 20,000 Argentinian fans who just showed up in Times Square while Argentina was getting ready to play a final in New York. And so whether or not we get to that scale is hard to predict, but we do expect that depending on the team, you would get a lot of interested folks. If you draw England or France, any of these big soccer nations with big contingents of fans, we would expect to see a lot of folks come here. So we'll learn who's drawn to play their group stage matches here in December of 2025. And one of the things for business owners that we want to highlight is once you have that information, and we want to make sure you get that information as soon as it's available to us, we have the ability, I think, to do a lot of tailored things that, again, can help draw people out into the community. So if, for example, the Chinese national team is assigned to its group stage matches in Seattle, I think there's a tremendous opportunity for in-language advertising, in-market advertising, as folks are planning their trip into Seattle so that they know where to go when they come here. And I think the CID is really well positioned for that, as is Pioneer Square, to be the neighborhoods that are most likely to get a lot of that collateral benefit. And again, our job is going to be to give information to businesses. One thing that you won't ever hear me say is telling you what you should do. So I'm not a business planner. I'm not an expert in running a small business. I'm not going to tell you by what percentage you should increase your inventory or by what number of folks you should increase your staffing. But what I do want to make sure that you have is information to make those decisions for yourselves about how you might want to adjust businesses if you're a business owner. Roles. So I did just hand out a bunch of scarves that say FIFA on them. Confusingly, I don't work for FIFA. I work for a Washington State nonprofit called the Local Organizing Committee. Every host city has one. In some cases, they're elements of city government, but in our case, we're a 501c3 nonprofit. And our job is to coordinate with FIFA and then to coordinate with the city government, the county government, the state government, and in some cases, the federal government. But we're none of those things. So our job is primarily planning for community impact. And our approach to this is that we want to create a lasting impact positively in the community for having hosted the games. Implicit in that is there's, again, a history of hosting games like this or mega events like this in communities where the benefit doesn't get spread around, where they can be extractive of communities. And so the thing that we really take pride in and that we're interested in trying to do, although it's a large task, is to figure out how to break that pattern and get the benefit out into the community. We're going to test some approaches. Some of them might work, some of them might not. But the legacy of this, and that's my job, Chief Legacy Officer, is to test approaches, and then if they work, make sure that the next mega events that come through the community, that come through the stadium, know about what worked and hopefully can build on those. So when we talk about legacy, I won't spend a lot of time here, but we are structured around 6 pillars, ways to think about legacy. So there's human rights. Human rights is a big phrase. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. In our case, we're talking about safeguarding and inclusion. So anybody who comes here feeling welcome and safe. We're talking about workers' rights. And we just actually signed, we're the only host city for the 2026 World Cup to have signed a labor standards agreement with our local AFL-CIO affiliate. So we just signed that labor standards agreement with Martin Luther King Labor Council. Sustainability, so we want to promote approaches that are better for the earth instead of worse. Accessibility, anybody, regardless of how they move, communicate, or perceive the world, should be able to participate in the event. And then community, culture, children, those 3 sort of come together, and a lot of those aspects show up in the stadium neighborhoods like Chinatown International District. So when we talk about the neighborhoods, there are a couple things. Again, we recognize that we have a particular obligation to first communicate with, learn from the stadium neighborhoods, and by that we mean Chinatown International District, SoDo, and Pioneer Square. That's why I'm out here now, more than a year from the event, and we've been out partnering with SCPTA and the BIA and Friends of Little Saigon for a couple of months now. We've already done 1 set of surveys for small businesses in and around the CID, and we're really glad that you're here today to help us continue to grow the information that's both out in the community and to hear back from you all about what would be helpful. We're doing that through community information sessions like this one, surveys like the one that hopefully you'll fill out after this. We're going to be hiring through community-based organizations full-time World Cup liaisons in each of the 3 stadium neighborhoods. So we're in a conversation right now with SCPTA where SCPTA would hire somebody. We're not under contract yet, so I don't want to bind them to this, but where they would hire a person whose full job, or people whose job is to provide information, take calls from the community to learn about the World Cup. We still got to negotiate exactly what that looks like, but that's the approach that we're taking, and one of the most important parts of that is that it's an employee of the community-based organizations as opposed to an employee of our local organizing committee. This is just like here's where we've been, here's where we're going. So again, we've had community information sessions in the CID, in Pioneer Square. We've had surveys, both in the CID and Pioneer Square. This is the second round of information sessions in the CID. We'll do a second round of surveying here. I think it merits particular attention to make sure in the CID in particular, we're getting out and talking to folks. We're going to be doing the same thing with SOTO by the end of the year. And the idea is that we'll have about 18 months of accumulated information awareness and relationships as we go into 2026 that we can then use to get information out and in as the event is getting closer. All right, so some of the ways that we want to work with you all. And some of these we are off and running, and some of these we're still developing them. But a couple I want to highlight. One, you'll see Seattle FWC 26, that's the handle of our organization, an augmented reality game. So we are, actually it's exciting, we were just playing with the demo version of it now. But we've got an app under development, and its purpose is to create incentives for people to go out into communities by geo-fencing little arenas for my Pokemon Go players out there, where you can go play a game. And what we want to do is get more people to your doors. What we're not going to do is link that to whether or not they actually make a purchase in any particular business, but we do want to get people out. So the game itself will highlight points of interest in the stadium neighborhoods, in downtown, and then we'll have similar arrangements in a couple of other cities across the state. And when somebody gets there, they'll be able to participate in a couple of soccer-themed games. One of them is an augmented reality juggling contest where you sort of bounce the ball by moving your head on the screen. And if you win points, you can exchange those for real-life merchandise. And so some of it might be scarves, although you've already got these now, so you might not be incented. But one thing that we're excited about is the ability to actually link that to the ability to win tickets to some of the matches. These are going to be pretty high demand tickets. And the reason I highlight that is we believe that if we get this approach right, it has the potential to move a lot of people out into the community. We're going to open that a couple of months before the tournament starts. That's another way to broaden the benefit. It's not just geographic, but it's by time. So let's get people out into the neighborhoods earlier than the games themselves start, incent them through the ability to do things like win tickets or have the scarf that you have, and then refine how it works because we'll be using it for a couple of months before the tournament starts. Another of the projects that we're undertaking right now is something called the Unity Loop. So this is a curated walking path where we're going to, in sort of if that's the app, this is the map. In real life, you just sort of show up, walk the loop. One of the analogs, although it's not quite the same, if you go to Boston, you usually hear about walking the Freedom Trail. We want to create a similar dynamic in Seattle where people will walk the Unity Loop, and it will connect the stadiums through Chinatown International District and Pioneer Square, up the waterfront, up 4th and 5th, Westlake, Olympic Sculpture Park, and then come back together at Seattle Center with connectors up to Central District and Capitol Hill, again, wanting to make sure that we're serious about driving benefit to those neighborhoods as well. You might have been sitting here being like, okay, how much are they going to charge us to be on the app? How much are they going to charge us to be on the Unity Loop? We're a nonprofit, and we go away as soon as the World Cup's over. We're not going to charge anything for that. So our funding model is we raise funds through corporate sponsorship that allows us to then create assets or activations that are motivated by the pillars that I shared here. And because of the special or specific focus we have on the stadium neighborhood, CID, Pioneer Square in particular, that's going to be our priority, place to implement some of those strategies. So there's a couple other things up here that I'll highlight that are CID specific. So one of the pieces of feedback we get quite a bit in surveys so far is cleanliness, trash, hygiene. Like, how can we make sure that the event itself doesn't make that situation worse here? So we're experiencing, getting ready to contract for expanded trash pickup. And some of the things that you'll answer in the survey will inform other potential points of investment that we would have. These are some of the themes that we've heard from community engagement sessions and surveys so far. One of the surveys we did in partnership with SCIPTA, the BIA and Friends of Little Saigon. Bathrooms is one of the things that comes up quite a bit. We don't believe that we're going to be in a position to fund, capital improvement, permanent bathrooms, but we are exploring some other options right now. So Are porta potties a good option? One of the other ideas that we've heard from a couple of folks that we want to see if there's interest in is, could we actually create a central fund that would pay privately owned or nonprofit entities that have bathrooms to make them available to the public, but centralize cleaning and security costs, and see if that's another way to get people, because they got to go to the bathroom, out into places that have bathrooms, and maybe they buy a coffee when they use the bathroom as well, but also create some incentives that a business owner, it would make sense for them to do it. So that's a thing we're testing, thinking about, and survey answers that say that that's a wonderful idea or that's a terrible idea would be super valuable. Safety comes up quite a bit. I showed the chart earlier. We're not a government, and so one of the things we hope to be just super clear about and respectful about is what we think we can do and what we think we can't do. We're not going to be the folks that are going to be able to change policing levels or change policing approaches. Those are conversations to have with the city. But we will be hiring some private security folks who will operate in and around the stadium in particular, and up at our Fan Fest in Seattle Center. And what kind of training those folks should have so that they're ready for visitors who might not speak English as a primary language, who might be coming from other places with different cultures around policing. Those are all questions that we hope to solve with training, and again, would love feedback there. All right, so for businesses in particular, I think one of the questions has been, okay, how do we get involved if we want to get involved? I've described some of the official FIFA things that'll happen. So FIFA will control the stadium, they'll control the matches, they'll control the games, and really if it's inside of the perimeter of the stadium, that's FIFA. The LOC, Local Organizing Committee, that's us. We'll strike a couple of formal partnerships. Some of those will be through the app that I described, some of them through the Unity Loop, and there'll be a couple of other activations. We'll have the ability to do some work out in the community, but we're an 8-person organization right now, so I don't think we're going to have the ability to do things at the same scale as the World Cup is. I think what that creates is opportunity for small businesses, for cultural institutions, for nonprofits to decide what you all want to do about the event. And this is where, again, I don't believe it's our job to tell you what to do, but I do think it is our job to give you the information so that you can decide what to do with your business and what kind of opportunities there might be. And we do think whether it's watch parties inside of businesses or perhaps a senior center, or whether it is a targeted marketing campaign once you figure out what nations might be playing here, or it's some special menu item that a restaurant might create. We think that there is going to be a lot of opportunity there. And as you all come up with those ideas, the idea is that you'd be able to communicate those to your neighborhood liaison who's working in a community-based organization. And then we would be able to get that information and feature it on things like our website, like the app, in our communications out to the other 16 host cities and the other nations that are going to be coming here to play. In summary, it's a moment where the world's looking at us, and a lot of folks will be here, and our measure of success is whether we create benefit that lasts on local priorities. And it's a tall task. History doesn't, can show more events that extract than are additive to the community. And we think that through some of those strategies that we've described and some of the ideas that you'll share today in your survey or that other folks will, we can come up with a couple of things that get us towards broadening the benefit and making it last in the community. Last two things. Confusingly, there is an event coming in 2025 called the FIFA Club World Cup. It is not the same as the 2026 World Cup, although both are operated by FIFA. The Club World Cup is soccer teams. The World Cup is nations playing each other. The reason I point this out is we are responsible for planning the community work around the 2026 World Cup, and there's not a similar group doing the same work for the FIFA Club World Cup. So that event's still going to be fun. It's still going to be exciting. For soccer fans, you could expect that it would be a lot like the Champions League game that the Sounders played in a couple of years ago when they won, sold-out stadium. But it's not going to come with the same level of external to the stadium coordination. There's not a group like ours going around doing presentations right now about the Club World Cup. We expect the external piece of it to be much more small scale. So now you all know that, and when somebody says, but I just heard the World Cup's coming here in 2025, you will now be able to say, aha, that is the Club World Cup. Most of you actually didn't listen to almost anything that I said, and what you might actually just care about is how do I get tickets to the games? So you can scan this QR code. That's how you register for tickets. FIFA is the only organization that can sell tickets. If some organization, perhaps on Instagram, tells you right now that you can buy tickets from them, they do not have tickets. So that's a speculative business model. You can choose to do what you would like to, but nobody has tickets except for FIFA right now. Last thing, that's our website, our Instagram, emails. I'm happy to answer any questions that folks might have, and I appreciate you all taking time out of your day to come here and listen.